Let's spend a few minutes here before we say goodbye talking about the technology you work with.
Yeah.
Because, I mentioned like the implications of growing an ear, and like, oh my gosh, are we going to be able to? What are the potentials for that? But what about just the genetic revolution in general? Like, people are worried about this, designer babies, this kind of thing. What's your techno-optimist view on that? Like, do you express any caution or hesitation about it because you think there are moral issues, or I don't know, it could be bad for humanity in any way? I actually, just tell me what your thoughts on that.
I think I have less trepidation about this than even most people in kind of the biotech industry or in genetics.
Yeah.
You may have heard of this case, I think it was about a year ago in China, where they used CRISPR to create the first genetically engineered babies.
Yeah, and CRISPR, again, being a technique to modify your DNA.
Yeah, and I think this kind of thing is going to happen, and I think it has a lot more promise than it does risks, I guess. There are definitely things to consider and things to think about when you're doing it. And the case in China probably didn't make a lot of sense, especially the specific gene he was editing. But there's a lot more fear, I think, in moving forward. If somebody moves forward and it takes a misstep, yes, it can cause lots of damage, but there's kind of an imbalance in the risk and reward, especially from a regulatory level. When you're allowing or restricting these types of technologies, if you allow something to go to market and it causes negative effects, people will look at the regulators and say, why did you let this happen? But if you hold something off the market that could save lives, nobody sees that directly, so they don't get they don't bear the consequences or the of that. So there's a very lopsided motivation, and
it's just like, we're not going to let any offenders out of jail because no one sees, the
upstanding citizen who's turned their life around and is a good father in their kid's life now or something.
Yeah. They don't
what you
see
see
that.
is the person who goes on to reoffend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't think most people are okay. There's probably a lot of posturing, but that's what I see. So when I watch a video on genetic engineering, a documentary on, we're working on medicine now, but what if people want to improve the intelligence of their child, or code for these sorts of things, or alter the genes for this or that? I don't think people are worried about mistakes. They're worried about successes, and it's this fear of injustice that the rich will get it and the poor won't, and whether it's a rich country or whether it's a rich community or whether it's just a rich person and the poor person doesn't, it's these sorts of things, right? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Is it the same kind of? Yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think these kind of issues of inequality kind of and amplifying. I think we need to think about them, but at the same time, like, I see technology more as a more democratizing
a leveler.
Power. Yeah, a leveler.
Yeah.
If you look at technology, the most cutting edge technology in the world, like the latest iPhone.
Yeah.
Somebody who is the richest person in the world, like Jeff Bezos or somebody, he gets the same iPhone as maybe not a poor person in a developing country, but a middle class person in the U.S. has the same iPhone. You can't really buy that much better technology that improves your life. There's obviously stuff that does improve your life, but the technology, the optimization has driven down the prices, and so the technology becomes more accessible the more it's implemented.
Yeah.
And usually the first people that can take advantage of it are the wealthy, and that's kind of the definition of being wealthy, is that you can do stuff that other people can't. So if these technologies come about, making people smarter or something, and I think they probably will. I don't think there's no technical limitation that would prevent that.
Is there any like dystopian sci-fi about genetic engineering? Is there?
Yeah,
there must be, right?
I love Gattaca. Have you ever seen the movie Gattaca? I think it was from the 90s. It was a good movie.
I have once, but it was a while back.
So the plot of that movie was basically this: there's heavily genetically modified people who have been kind of optimized this, ideal person, And the hero of the movie is this, person who was born naturally without the modifications, but has just the spunk to like compete with them and sneaks into the system and ends up doing just as well or whatever, something like that.
Is that the moral of the story?
Yeah, basically that it paints it as a pretty dystopian thing, but that I think it's been a while since I've seen it, but it kind of pits the human will against this kind of techno optimized person, and it's a good movie, but at the same time I feel like we are always improving as a species.
Yeah, I think it's unavoidable.
Yeah,
who's not going to want that for their kid? And it's going to start with disease prevention.
It's going to start with disease prevention.
If everyone's going to want, obviously,
and it's going to start with the wealthy people,
to
the wealthy
remove
nations.
Disease.
But,
yeah.
But it'll.
And then it's like it's gonna, because it's all these little steps, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're talking about preventing some kind of child cancer and then going on to intelligence. It's going to start with that, and then it's going to go on to.
But health and disease is not. There's not a sharp line between that.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So it's going to gradually move on to.
These people who are trying to treat aging as a disease.
I want a stronger child. I want him to be or her to be stronger and more fit and to be a better athlete. And then they're going on to designer babies, and people freak out about the idea of just having this. And then what's a perfect person? See, I think people are worried about that too.
I don't think it's you kind of have this vision of, maybe it comes from fears of like early 20th century eugenics movements in the U.S. and
it does.
In Germany.
People
where,
are very
people
afraid of that.
An image of a single ideal like person that everybody should strive towards, and I don't think that's what it's going to be. I think there's going to be a diversity, and some people want their children to be more athletic, some people might want them to be more intelligent, and there's going to be different strains in different countries and different cultures and different individuals that have different views. I don't think there's going to be I don't think it's going to be a homogenizing force. I think it's going to be a diversifying force.
I actually agree, and I think there's also a belief like there's a zero-sum game. Like we can only have so many supermodels or so many fit people. Some people have to be overweight, or some people have to be, I don't know, not as attractive, I guess. And I don't believe that. Like, why not have us all be more physically fit, right? I don't know. It's just.
I think most people would like that.
I think so.
But there might be trade-offs, though. So I think there's, even if you get down to the genetic engineering, you might have trade-offs with what you can do.
I think there'll be. I think we need to have a real honest thought experiment about what the long. So what's the long game here? Like, so okay, in 200 years, we're able to genetically modify every baby to everyone's liking. I want to see a simulation on that. Like, so what's the human race going to look like if, like, and it's going to take time for it to trickle down so that everyone in every part of the world has access to this. And honestly, and I think that might be some of the biggest reason why people don't like it, is because it's not going to be able to reach, a tribe of pygmies in Africa, and it's they're going to be left behind and that kind of thing.
You might have said the same thing about mobile phones in the 90s.
Oh yeah,
and mobile phones actually, empowered.
They're saying that now about space travel. They're saying it's not fair that someone can pay $100,000 and go to travel the world, but this is a little different because now we're dealing with the human body and
I think the risk that is people think about is that this could be an amplifying effect.
Yeah, that's what we said at the start. Yeah.
So if you're already in the haves, and you make yourself smarter, you're going to be even more of a have and make that gap bigger. But I don't know. I don't see things playing out that way.
I don't know. I haven't thought about it enough. Technology does both.
It does.
I mean, if you're going to use technology to your advantage versus someone who doesn't, or who uses technology to their disadvantage, it's going to accelerate. It's going to polarize the two outcomes. And so I suppose with gene modification, I don't know. Everyone's going to want to remove health ailments from their babies, and then, but it will eventually reach, right? It'll eventually reach everybody the way cell phones do.
I assume it will.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the way I think technology usually plays out.
And then I think there's this overall worry as there has been for new introductory technologies for the longest time.
Yeah, right. I mean, everything's. People always like to be nostalgic, and anything that's
Yeah.
changing is scary, and it can be scary. And not everybody's going to want to jump on, especially early on. The other thing that plays into it is not just wealth and affluence, but or willingness to take risks.
That's
Because
true.
some of these early ones are probably going to have a fair bit of risk associated. Or at least unknown outcomes.
Yeah, it's going to be the ones who are desperate. My child's going to be born with this cancer unless we do something. And then the ones who are just experimental, more daring, I guess.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of these will be able to be implemented later in life as opposed to the to babies. So it would be interesting, and
That's a good point.
you'd have more self-autonomy if, as an adult or a teenager, you could decide to like engineer yourself at that point. And there are a lot less ethical considerations too, because you
Yeah.
would only have to engineer your cells. It wouldn't be a permanent change that you'd pass on to your children. And that's one of the factors right now. And there's generally a worldwide moratorium on engineering germline cells, the ones that will be passed on. So that's why this CRISPR engineered baby in China was a scandal, because they did that.
And this individual will grow up and have, if he or she has children,
Yeah, these
then,
twin
then-
girls, they could have children, and they'll pass on the same change.
so it's in perpetuity.
Yeah.
This altering of
Yep.
the DNA.
Yeah.
I think
Although, to be frank, the mutation they made, I don't know if they know if there's any off-target effects, but the targeted mutation that they're successfully made was to a gene version that already exists in other people. So it's
Okay.
not something completely new. It's not a transgenic
Got it.
person. They're not putting a gene in from some other organism or something like that.
Well, maybe that freaks people out too.
It
Maybe
does.
the ones who are more traditional, maybe more conservative, they might say, because they've done this with animals all the time. They've taken fish and they've made them glow in the dark, or they made kittens glow in the dark, I think, because they introduced some bioluminescence to it from some
Yeah.
other animal.
Yeah,
Like, man, we're gonna have people with wings, and I mean, what does it mean to be human? And
It's a diversifying power, this technology, like I was saying. I mean,
yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. If you introduce these other, I want a third arm, whatever. I don't know. Well, I mean, in theory, we can make ourselves glow.
yeah, that would be pretty easy to do.
Yeah. See, now we're talking about experiments, and that makes people think of some crazy guy in a lab coat, like the picture you offered us here. So you're actually not putting people at ease in this conversation. I hate to say it. No. Yeah, there you go.
I have GFP, green fluorescent protein genes, if you want some.
I'd put those online and sell them on the dark web. People pay good Bitcoin for that. Oh yeah, and I also think if we try to do this, I think we'll find in time that there's a limit, right? Because I think people are saying like, well, if you genetically engineer your child to be, it starts off with just, I want him or her to be a little taller and stronger. Well, then if everyone's that tall, well, then you want to have a leg up. Well, then pretty soon we're going to have 10 feet tall monsters, and I think we're going to find a limit. Yes, we're going to find a limit. Or if you want your child to be a little bit smarter than the rest, but then everyone does that, well, then there's going to be a race, and okay, everyone's going to be 200 IQ. But I think we're going to find there's a limit to this. I think we'll find the limits. And
I don't know if there will be so much of a hard limit, but there will be trade-offs. Once you get to the extreme, you're going to start having other consequences that may or may not be able to predict. So you can see this with like breeding dogs, for example. People want bigger dogs, and they've bred these large breeding dogs, but the rest of their body really hasn't evolved over as much time to handle that size of a body. So you have joint problems. You could have the same thing if you try to target one specific thing. You can probably, extend that trait a long ways, but you're going to have consequences because the rest of your body isn't evolved for that condition.
It's the unforeseen limitations.
Yeah.
And by that I don't mean them as a negative. I mean people aren't recognizing the natural confines that will keep us from creating freaks, just crazy 12-foot tall monsters, that would just kill in boxing or UFC or football field or whatever.
There's reasons humans evolved to be the height they are. We don't understand them all probably, but there's different conditions that are adapted to different sizes, and if you push yourself too far.
Yeah,
and have
yeah.
problems.
I believe that there are these unforeseen natural limiters. Just like we don't appreciate that there'll be a new technology on the horizon to help us. So we think, oh man, Earth is doomed because we're going to continue having as many babies and emitting as much CO2. And it's like, yeah, but they've been wrong about that since all the 20th century, because they assumed in the 50s that by the 90s we would be gone, or we would be.
The future's hard to predict, and
yeah, because
and fear does sell. It's easy to.
Yeah, I think we
sell
get stuck
headlines
in
if
not
there's fear.
recognizing the unseen changes
Yeah.
that will come. And in this case, with the genetic modification, the unforeseen, like I said, natural limiters, like we won't want to have people 12 feet tall, and they'll be created in a way that benefits people.
What's an interesting thing to think about, though, is if people start to leave the Earth, then you're no longer in those conditions that you evolved for. So maybe being 12 feet tall wouldn't be a bad idea if you're living on an asteroid belt.
Well, then we better engineer people like that so they can, right? If that's in fact good, because we need to mine these asteroids, right?
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of zinc or whatever.
We need the lithium for your cell phone batteries, right?
Yes, we do. Mine just died, as a matter. In fact, my tablet died, so I couldn't take all the questions.
Oh, no.
Oh, you know what? Kelly chimed in and she said Germany tried that with the master race. See, so there's the eugenics things. So people worry about that.
There's a big difference, though, I think, with the top-down idea of a perfect human. And the eugenics movement really was pioneered here in the U.S., and the Germans copied it and took it to a horrible extreme. But even in the U.S., it was ugly. There was, at the fair, people would get blue ribbons for the most ideal family, and actually ribbons for the families that were the most.
So they had the best offspring, sort of like you would.
Just like breeding cattle.
Yeah.
They have
people
some idea of what the perfect human family looks like, and.
Well, we do that with models and athletes. We just don't give ribbons.
Yeah.
Well, we just give modeling contracts.
Yeah. That's less top down, though, and I think
true.
Ideally,
kind of
these kind of there's
it's not
without hierarchies.
It's not as blatant.
Yeah, but there's differences. There's not a single ideal always. There's more diversity, and I think there should be even more than the modeling industry probably.
That's
has.
true. If you talk to someone in China about with the perfect figure, they're gonna have a drastically different image than someone in the U.S. or someone who knows where.
Yeah, and
that's true.
I think that diversity, and not only culture to culture, but individual to individual. And
It'll heighten diversity. I think you're right.
I think it can, and I hope it does.
We'll actualize. We'll be more of what we hope and want to be.
Yeah.
And that will cause us to just extend the potential and the Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's messy. I mean, there's all these different ways you can think about it, but I like that, and I like ending this conversation on a positive note that. Techno optimist.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.